In this video series, I've been talking about burnout and stress. Today's video is about how important is a weekly day off. Hi, I'm Dr. Greg Nelson, and let's face it, we live in an era where we are at an all-time high with burnout and chronic stress, high anxiety, lots of uncertainty. The stress levels are just going up and up and up. We're being asked to do more. We're being asked to produce more. We're being asked to consume more. So that our culture is just all about productivity and consumption. And when we're under that kind of stress, that kind of overwhelm, that kind of burden, the sense of having given everything we have to give and we have nothing less to give, nothing left to give, that's what creates burnout. So in this series, we've been talking about 5 different practices for preventing burnout and chronic stress. And in this video, I'm talking about a very practical issue. What would it be like if you actually made the courageous choice to take one day off every week? Now you're probably wondering, well, I don't always work the weekends. Well, maybe or maybe not. But what do I mean by a day off? Is it just sitting around doing nothing? Or is there something even more strategic in terms of what we do with that day off? Let me tell this story. I love sailing. And back in the day when my kids were much younger, we were sailing up in the San Juan Islands. That's at the border between northwestern Washington State and British Columbia, Canada. Beautiful islands. It was a perfect day for sailing. Wind was strong. My sails were up. We were heeling over, having lots of speed. And as I looked around, all the sailboats were out. Everybody's having a good time. And as the afternoon wore on, however, the clouds began to cover the sky. And not just these beautiful white cumulus clouds, but these angry dark gray clouds. The wind picked up. I looked around, and sure enough, other boats were starting to drop their sails. Many of them had already gone into harbor. And I said, man, this is awesome. This is what sailors live for. Let's keep sailing. I tightened in the sails. We were heeling over more and more. The wind was increasing even more, and then all of a sudden we heard this loud clap of thunder in the distance, and pretty soon the thunder got closer, and then lightning is coming out of the dark clouds. The wind is amping up its velocity, and at this point I realized I had to drop the sails. Furled the head sail, dropped the mainsail, had the motor on, and I began looking around. Where is the safest harbor I can go to escape this terrible storm? I finally saw off in the distance what looked like a harbor, uninhabited, but it looked like it was surrounded on 3 sides, and that might be the perfect place. I quickly turned that direction, headed there as fast as my little 7.5 Honda outboard could go. We made it into the harbor. I dropped anchor, and we sat there while the wind blew and howled around us, and the rain was pelting our boat. We were fortunately in the cabin, staying as dry as we could. I will never forget that feeling of being in that anchorage, that safe harbor for those minutes while the storm was blowing. I thought a lot about that story, especially when we are living in times that are full of chaos. The storms of life are blowing heavily. We have uncertainty that comes with it. Our stress levels go up. And we wonder whether we're going to be able to keep our jobs, or whether we're going to have enough work, or whether we will be able to experience financial sustainability. We have all the worries in the world. And in this particular era, we have a lot of chaos going on. So the stress levels are high. We're being asked to do more than we've ever been asked before. And with the increased stress comes increased anxiety, and ultimately with chronic stress comes burnout. We've given everything we can give, we have nothing left to give. And so our systems collapse. Imagine what it would be like every 7 days to take a full day. a strategic stop, so to speak, a safe harbor to do several things. I want to talk about those several things. One of the things that our culture is so good at about forcing us to conform to is their top priorities. And in our culture, there are two things that are pressed upon us, two identities. One is that our greatest value and worth is in how much we produce. We are primarily producers. We're production experts and specialists. We have everything to get done. So we're tempted to view our identity as simply producers. The second thing that we are tempted to identify with is we are primarily consumers. It's all about consumption. In this era, we have so much that we're consuming. We have the news we're consuming. We have entertainment that we're consuming. We are constantly connected with our smartphones, never off of the connections. So we're tempted to see our identity primarily as consumers. The amount that we consume or what we're consuming either makes us valuable or unvaluable, full of worth or not full of worth. When we begin to identify with being nothing more than producers and consumers, we have stepped out of alignment with our deepest selves, because there resides in every one of us that deepest part of us that some people would call the soul, that place where our eternal value and worth reside. But when we've covered that up with all of this producing and consumption during the week, we lose sight of who we really are. And the moment we step out of alignment with who we are, our stress levels are going up, even if we're doing it consciously or not. Our anxieties level go up, our confidence goes down, the fears rise up. We get this sense of overwhelm, like we can never stop. And then we're consumed. We're consumed by chronic stress that leads to burnout, overwhelm. I have nothing more to give. So that one day off, for it to be truly effective, needs to center on this issue of identity. And that's where this word remember comes in. In fact, Jewish scriptures talk about the fourth commandment, this idea of remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy, make it holistic. What is that remember? That remember is a fascinating word. It means to re-member. What needs to be remembered? It's all those parts of ourselves that we've lost during the busyness of the week. The top human values of self-reflection and self-evaluation, relational connection, our connection with nature, all those things in the busyness of our productivity and consumption during the week get lost. So isn't it interesting that there is a history of a spiritual practice that comes along in order to help us remember all these pieces that are getting lost during the week, bringing them all back together to be remembered into our wholeness, our full humanity. Imagine having a day every week, like our Jewish friends have learned to do. I grew up in a religious tradition that did the same thing from Friday evening to Saturday sundown. We had a day to remember, in which we spent a lot of time remembering our family relationships, the people closest to us, our friendships. We spent time sort of paying attention to our deepest priorities, that spiritual part of ourselves where we understand our eternal worth and value. And then the other thing that I did as a kid, our family would go out into nature, and I remember feeling as a child and growing up to be this young adult that my connection with Mother Nature, with the environment, took on a whole new meaning, because during that seventh day, we would have opportunity to make these connections. Imagine every seventh day, or you had 24 hours to do whatever it takes to remember yourself, to reconnect with that deepest part of yourself where your true value is, To be reminded that your value is not in how much you produced or how well you produced or how much you consumed or how much or how little you consumed. Your true value was deep inside, where this place of worth and value that can never be touched by anybody else but remains secure. You tap back into that place. A 24 hours where you can rebuild your connections with your family, with your children, with your closest friends, with community people that matter to you, and where you have opportunity to go out in nature and experience what it means to be a human on this planet surrounded by the natural world that we value and want to show respect and honor to. 24 hours. What would that look like for you if you chose to take this seriously? Can you think of some things? That's why some people, for example, our Jewish friends, and I grew up in this religious tradition where there was a similar concept that a part of the remembering, a part of the stepping away from consumerism and productivity was let's have 24 hours where we're not doing any work, where we're not going to businesses, so that we remind ourselves that we are not just producers and consumers. So we put some boundaries around that time to remember, bring all these disparate pieces back into our whole again, our humanity. In fact, even some of the tech giants, the founders of those, are starting to use the word a technology Sabbath for their families, for their children. What does that mean? A technology Sabbath means they're going to create a boundary in time and say during this time, when we step into this boundary, these guardrails for our experience, there will be no technology. Well, that's hard for me even to do. But imagine the value where we're, instead of being bombarded and consuming everything with all of our always-on technology, we lay it aside in order to pay attention to the deeper, more human values that we can have. Maybe, however, we use technology to connect with family that are at a distance. That's great, we're making the human connections, but other than that, what would happen if we set it aside in order for us to be our full humanity? That's what a weekly day off can look like. If we take it strategically, if we plan it and intentionalize it. I can tell you, growing up with that whole experience, weekly experience, I look back and some of my best family memories were during those, what we called Sabbath. A day for rest, recovery, recuperation, revitalization, and connecting with those parts that we had just lost during the week. I want to challenge you. I want to invite you to take a challenge. Try it. What would it look like for you? What could you do during those 24 hours where it would actually be restoring? So that when you're ready to face the week, you face it with greater energy, with greater vision, and a greater sense of who you really are. That your identity is secure, based deep inside of you, eternally secure. You go into the world to say, okay, what difference now can I make? That could be a game changer. Well, thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.